The common thread is that in more populated areas, it's a lot easier to find associate doctors. It's a lot easier to find staff. Of course, the practice culture plays a big part of your retention and what sort of team members you attract and retain. But overall, it's a lot more difficult to get an associate and team members in rural areas. So based on the urban and suburban question, that's a huge advantage.
So maybe a better way to say that is from like a marketing point of view, the way I think about it is there's a cap on a rural market where in a big market, you have no cap.
I think some challenges that you face on the rural side is related to like proximity and availability of specialists. It almost forces you to be more of a jack of all trades because there isn't necessarily someone close by that can help you.
Welcome back to another episode of Dental Marketing Theory. I'm your host, Gary Bird. I'm the owner of SMC National, where we help offices just like yours level the playing field against the big guys out there so you can grow the way that you want. But you can't grow if you don't know where to open your practice or the pros and cons of opening a practice in different areas. Today, Dr. Antani and Dr. Franco do an amazing job, who are both owner doctors in different kinds of markets, and they share their experiences and the pros and cons that they have seen, and they're going to touch on a lot of different topics. This was a great episode. I learned a ton. I'm sure you will too. Stay tuned. All right, we are live for another episode of Dental Marketing Theory, and today we're going to be talking about rural markets versus urban, suburban, and even cities. And I appreciate Dr. Franco and Dr. Antani being willing to come on today and have these conversations. So Dr. Franco, I'm going to ask you first, give me some of the advantages of being in a rural market.
Less competition, more favorable ratios when you talk about the number of dentists to patients and just volume and density of dentists in your area is probably a big one. There's just a different culture here of people and patients. And I think that allows that patient-doctor relationship, that trust between the two, to build faster, because I think it's easier for people to get to know you on a microscopic level just due to proximity.
And even if you don't, you're going to see your patients at the store, right, Dr. Franco? Like, what's the population of your area? I looked it up and it's
about 25,000.
Okay. So you're going to bump into your patients
every day.
For sure.
All the time, everywhere I go. And I see that as a good thing. You know, I see that as a positive. So that'd be another big one to consider.
If you're an introvert and you don't want to see your patients every day and say hi to people, that might not be a good thing, right? Like, and to your point, the culture is huge. I love it. So far, we got competition and culture, and I agree with you. But some small towns, the culture is not great, right? Like there's certain areas I wouldn't want to live in small town. There's some big towns that I love visiting and love spending time there. And then there's other big cities I don't want to ever go to and I don't ever want to be around, right? So it's like, but I think both of those can be true. For the culture one can be true on both sides. So I think that's a great point.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But why don't you tell us a little bit of the bourbon, suburban side, what you think of some of the advantages are?
You know, I think I'll echo Dr. Franco that it depends on so many factors. But the common thread is that in more populated areas, it's a lot easier to find associate doctors. It's a lot easier to find staff. And of course, the practice culture plays a big part of your retention and what sort of team members you attract and retain. But overall, it's a lot more difficult to get an associate and team members in rural areas. So based on the urban and suburban question, that's a huge advantage.
I think it's safe to say, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong on this, it's easier to get new patients in some of the rural areas because there's less dentists to compete with. However, it's harder to get team members to support those new patients or patients in general. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I think I mostly agree with that. You know, one thing that I would throw in there when you talk about the ease of getting new patients, I would just, consider volume as a huge benefit in a bigger city as far as acquiring new patients. I don't know, in my mind, could potentially be easier when you've got such a huge pool of folks to pull from. On the staffing, I would agree completely.
Voting is open for Dental Woo's top dental
podcast. It starts on November 1st and ends on December 31st. Each vote supports the podcast. Last year, we won multiple top spots, and this year, we're hoping to do even better. This year, our goal is to get 1,000 unique voters on this podcast. Help us reach our goal, and your vote will count. Voting is easy. Just click the link below and find Dental Marketing Go, and then submit it. It's super fast. There's a cap on a rural market, where in a big market, you have no cap. Like you could build, if you're in Los Angeles, you can build a practice with 500 new patients a month and 200 team members at one office if you wanted to. I don't know who would want to do that, but if you wanted to do that, you could. But in a rural market, you just can't do that. That's not possible to do because there might not be 500 total patients. So the rural market does create a cap. So I think that's a great way of thinking about it, but there is an easier time getting new patients. Like there's not as many complications from a marketing or attraction standpoint because there's just less competition. So now what would you list as like the biggest obstacles outside of labor, Dr. Franco, for the rural side?
Okay. So I think some challenges that you face on the rural side is related to like proximity and availability of specialists to help manage more complicated treatments or emergent situations. Almost forces you to be more of a jack of all trades because there isn't necessarily someone close by that can help you. I would say some other challenges would be just talked about volume of patients. So that makes it harder to, in my opinion, to grow a practice and offset any attrition that your practice might have. You're limited there. You're not close to any CEs for the most part. So you've got at least an extra day of travel. An office closure day, we know can be costly. I think there are less sort of team building opportunities in smaller towns. You can get creative.
If you're like, all I want to do is like all on fours and I want to do 5 of those a day and I want to shift my practice, that might be a little bit harder in a rural market. Is that true?
Totally. Yeah, that is way better for an urban setting. Any niche type of clinic, I only do veneers here. I only do sleep dentistry. I only want to do all on X. It's hard to get the volume to sustain a model like that. It's not impossible. I'm sure there are people doing it, but it's way more challenging.
You kind of have to take what's given to you because you have a smaller selection of people. Also, one other question. What about if you're in a city and you need to rebrand your office, let's say it was bad office manager, absolutely just trashed all the patients, didn't take care of people. Doctor was not really tuned in. Once they got tuned in, they were like, man, we need to fix this. Fire the office manager. We're going to rebrand. In a city, super easy, right? Like you can basically put up a new sign, put up a new name, put up a new Google My Business, and you can attract everybody. I don't think you can do that in a small town, right?
You could do it, but everyone would know who you were and who was involved and the details. It would all be known. So, yeah.
Dr. Antani, so what are your thoughts on the disadvantages to the like suburban or city more side of it?
Well, one disadvantage for sure is the sheer competition, quote unquote, between dentists. There may not be a mindset of competition, but there's saturation. So indirectly, you're competing anyway. In certain insurance plans and certain demographics, your reimbursement can be decreased as well, because if there are quite a few dentists in a setting, in a particular zip code or particular area, then yes, your insurance reimbursement may be lower for the same procedure in a more rural setting or suburban setting even. Indirect competition can be one of the detriments. But like Dr. Franco mentioned, when you have CEs that are closer and you can collaborate with other dentists, and it may or may not offset depending on your personality and how you get along with the rest of your dentist in town.
So I'll ask you some questions around competition because marketing. So I'm like top of funnel. So that's where my brain goes. And then I want you to kind of continue the thought. So when I think of competition, let's just use like Full Arch as an example. In the big cities, you can be super successful, but there's going to be people around you that are going to charge half as much as you for Full Arch or half as much as you for a crown because they're, for whatever reason, and I don't even want to go into all those different reasons, but that can create a problem, right? And it can make life harder on you. That's where my brain goes. How do you think through it?
I agree. There are ways for people to undercut you, but that's also true really anywhere. In the day, if you're successful enough and you're doing the kind of dentistry you want to do in a setting where you want to live, that's all that matters. But yes, to your point, there will be more competition. And even if you are the niche guy, if you're the guy that's the best at one particular thing, you'll probably have a few people around you that can, but it may not matter if you can keep your schedule full and be happy with it.
What about DSOs?
One thing I was going to add that kind of ties into DSOs is the number of insurance companies that people are in network with, and the specific type of patient that only wants to go where their insurance is in network. In urban areas where you have DSOs and they're in network with 50 different insurance companies, it's pretty difficult to compete with that if those are the patients that you're also seeing. It almost forces your hand to be in network with them, or go against that and say, I'm going to stay out of network and just offer quality service.
There's no middle road. In other words, like in a city, you can say, I'm going to accept this insurance and be out of network with all the other ones. And that works fine because there's so many people there and so many different businesses that have different types of insurances. In a rural market, there might only be the Walmart with their insurance, and that's the big employer. And you're either in network or out of network with them. And that you don't have as many choices, right? And so on that point, like, how do you think through the competition from a DSO from a suburban city standpoint? And then we'll talk about it from a rural standpoint.
As you know, we have a practice that's rural and then a suburban. So comparing between the two, I personally don't see much of a difference in the terms of DSOs, because DSOs have also really become attracted to the rural areas as well. So between the 2 or 3 practices that we had in these locations, I don't think the insurance participation mattered as much. If I don't take Medicaid in my suburban or urban practice, I'll be okay, especially if it's a small practice. In more rural areas, you may not have a choice. And that can be a good thing or a bad thing depending on your practice and your patients. Regarding DSOs, again, they have been attracted to basically in a demographic. Each DSO will have their own way of marketing, their own DNA. Some are fee for service completely. Some of them are in larger cities. Felt that the DSOs have cornered their market, and that's great. It hasn't affected my practice much at all.
Some people argue like, hey, I love these big DSOs when they come in because they become my new patient generator. They do the top of funnel marketing, drive the patient in, and a percentage of the patients don't like them, so they end up in my office.
That's true. Some people may not like a private practice and end up bouncing off to a DSO.
So Dr. Franco, what are your thoughts on rural DSO competition?
DSOs tend to drive patients our way more frequently than sort of take them from our practice, at least from what I know. And that just has to do with the experience that they have being necessarily what they expected it to be. All DSOs in their offices are bad, because that's not true. I think there are some great dentists out there for sure. The culture of our office, I think, tends to attract patients from DSOs. So I don't fear DSOs in that way. They are driven by profit. Their models are much more profit driven. The main downside I see with DSOs is how many insurances that they're willing to take, attract a lot of patients.
They can attract a lot of top of funnel patients, but then that also limits you on the amount of services and the way you can care for the patient as well, right? Because you're dramatic, even if they're negotiating with the insurance companies at scale, it still creates a limitation on what you can offer them. Okay, so last question for you guys. Someone new to dentistry and they can open up an office anywhere. Where should they open an office?
I've just been so lucky to be a part of an incredible practice and have an amazing team, and I love my patients. I love what I do, and I feel like I can really make an impact in my community. I would highly recommend a rural area, as biased as that may be.
Let me ask it this way then. How do you pick the right rural area? Like, how do you know the good rural areas versus the bad rural areas? How would you go through that and process that, Dr. Franco?
In my opinion, like word of mouth recommendation, someone who's from that town, talking to the people from there to get an idea of what type of town it is would be a good start. And my wife's from this town. We knew it well before moving here.
I would say new dentist or dentist who's been an associate for a long time. If you're going to go rural, obviously Dr. Franco loves it. Know your market. And you don't know it by looking at a P&L, looking at a map. Like I look at maps all the time for marketing, and I can tell you like, this looks decent, or it looks like we'll be able to get you some new patients, but I don't really know the area, right? I don't know the people by looking at a map.
The way that I prioritize your search would probably start with, in my mind, are you a family oriented person driven by priorities that revolve around building a family and living that type of life? Where do you want your family to be? What environment do you want your kids to be in? That's your thought process. Then what you're researching is a whole lot different than you're looking at the market. Where is there a good practice opportunity? I'm not a huge fan of startups. I think you find a well-oiled machine that's already doing it very well, pay a premium price for the practice and keep it going. I think you're so much better off and you'll be way far ahead looking at it from that lens.
I'm excited about this answer because I know he's actually gone through and done it before. So tell us where would you land? Which one would you land if you were a brand new dentist? Not brand new, but you've been in the dental industry, but you don't own a practice yet. What market are you going to? Going to the rural, suburban, urban, or big city?
I'm going to go rural. And I'm going to basically copy Dr. Franco's answer. And I've lived through it. I went rural right after residency. I worked a little bit for about half a year to a year in an urban setting. I went rural. And I got a big jump in my career from that. We bought, just like Dr. Franco, I recommend buying practices instead of startups. It gave us a big leg up by going into an area where there is a need for you. That can change over time. I was very rural for a while, then I moved to a more suburban location because life can change. If you're a brand new dentist, you have no responsibilities, you can go anywhere in the world, go rural. Go learn something new, go into an area where you're busy. Just like Dr. Franco mentioned, you can be the area expert and not have to refer every single thing out. You can learn a lot. You can gain a lot of insight. And then once you're settled into your career a little bit, do whatever you want. But I would say go rural first. That's my humble opinion.
Any closing thoughts, Dr. Franco? Because people are going to watch this. I think the dentists that have already done it, they might watch it because they're curious. But I'm actually thinking through the people who are like, okay, what am I going to do? Right? Because dentists ask this question a lot. What should I do? How should I do it? Any closing thoughts on someone out there trying to make this decision of where they should open an office?
My main thought is you've got to decide on a location first in that process. And it's such a hard thing to do when you're thinking about buying in or settling down. If you're going to make that leap, step one, where do you want to live? My recommendation, if family and kids are in the picture, you want to consider places that are close to family because you're going to need help. Parenting's hard. It takes a village. I would highly recommend staying close to family from that standpoint and make that, find a location like that you like. A lot of people talk about the benefits of being in a big city versus a rural. There are more things to do. There are more places to eat, proximity to a lot of fun and convenient things. And you've got to weigh that with being in a smaller town where those opportunities aren't there. Can say, I can get anywhere from this small town. I've got a direct flight to Dallas and I can get to Denver pretty easy. And so pick a place close to family if that's what's important to you. If not, just understand your market. Some of the pros and cons that we talked about, I think would give you a general idea of what it's like, rural versus big city. Rural, you're going to be more of a jack of all trades, probably, if you want to be successful. And in the urban area, you might have better chances at niche type of stuff.
Great answer. And you're speaking right to my heart. Food, coffee. If I don't have those two things, we got problems. I can supplement some of it, but it's like, okay, I need to get to those things. So that's what's most important to me, but I'm not a dentist. So, all right, Dr. Antani, what do you think?
Go where it makes you happy. If you're family oriented, just like Dr. Franco mentioned, stick with that. I know plenty of people that are living in New Jersey, New York, California. They're probably not making as much as they had hoped, but they're happy. And I also know a lot of people in rural areas that are just working like 2 or 3 days a week and they're not making as much as a full-time dentist, but they're happy. So don't let the finances be your main driver. Choose your happiness. And in time, if you end up going somewhere rural and you can't take it anymore, change it up. You'll be fine,
What do you mean by that? Like open a practice somewhere else?
Yeah. You can, if you're going to start out as a new dentist, you're probably going to have a job first, right? Go rural. If you don't like it, then you know that this is not for you. But don't make that decision based only on finances. Take into consideration where you want to live in terms of your family. If you love the outdoors, go rural. If you love the city, stay city. That's something that is a very personal decision that any new dentist needs to make. But if you're kind of like, I can go either way, then go rural. At least give it a try.
Yeah, great answers. All right, guys. Well, this was really, really good. I really appreciate you guys coming on. And just so everybody knows, we're not selling anything here. These are just two doctors who are giving back, and they wanted to cover this topic. And I so appreciate that. And it makes me trust your guys' opinions even more, right? If you guys were selling courses on how to open up your rural office, then I might take it with a grain of salt. But you guys just came in out of the goodness of your heart. And I really appreciate that about you guys. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah. Thanks for having
Gary.
us.
All right.
Thanks, Gary.